Hey everyone, welcome back to Pawpaw's Workshop. Well, I'm back in the shop today and I'm doing some more experimenting. In my continuing effort to be able to improve the dust collection in the shop, I decided to add a dust boot to the CNC for Newbie New Carve. And I think it's going to work out real well. Now, one of the things that I wanted to be able to do is keep the cost down. I wanted to be able to find materials already in the shop to be able to put this together and really not have to spend anything. So, bottom line, the only thing that I bought is I went over to Harbor Freight and bought a $1.99 brush. And with that, I was able to make the dust boot work quite well. Now, what I did is just cut out a simple rectangle with the two holes, and this is that $1.99 brush that I just cut and glued in with the silicone glue, and that worked well. Then I added some rare earth magnets on top, and that just snaps together just like that, without any problem whatsoever. This ring, that was a little bit interesting and fun. If I had to do this over again, and I'm sure I will, then I don't need all of these little teeth. I could reduce that down much smaller. And then on top of that, in keeping with the fact that I wanted to keep it very simple and cost effective, I just heated up the PVC so that the vacuum hose would fit right down in here. So again, no extra fittings. I started off this project with a little bit of design work and experimenting. I needed to determine exactly what diameter hole that I need to have, and I didn't want to use just the calipers. In Easel, it's very easy to design a project, take it out to the machine, run it, and then if need be, test it again. And that's what I did. I ran this with the PVC pipe at 61 millimeters, and I only ran this down about 0.1 of an inch. That's all that's necessary. I also needed to do the same thing for the magnets so that they would fit into the slot also. It was important to be able to have them snug, and it only took a couple of tries to get it perfect. If you decide to do this, of course you're going to need to measure the pipe that you have available as well as the type of magnets. And once you have that measurement, do this test, and it will save some time in the long run. From there, the rest of the design was done in VCarve Pro, and then once finished, I brought it out and used the Open Build software to run it on the Vox Alien Vasco. And this is the perfect machine to be able to run small projects like this. It works fantastic. It's a very solid and easy to use machine. I designed this project to use the material at 9 inches by 6 inches. Well, this particular piece of scrap that I had left over was only 8 3/4. It worked, but it just barely worked, and you can see how this bit came right up to the edge of the plywood. All's well though, it did just what it needed to do, and it's cutting this little dust boot out just fine. You can also see exactly how that bit is cutting as it goes through that edge, and that's something that you normally don't get to see, but it was kind of fun to be able to carve it this way. From this view, you can see just how close I was to the edge on both the left and the right side. Now again, this board was actually 8 3/4 inches, and I said, well, it'll still work based on the design, and sure enough, so you can see my marks right there, and it did. It cut it out exactly the way that I needed it to. Once it was all finished, it was time to remove this from the waste board and test it out just to see how it would work. And you can see this cut all the way through, and it did a fantastic job. And by the way, this glue and the tape method just works amazing. It's so easy to be able to hold the material down, and you don't have to worry about clamps getting in the way and hitting anything at all with the machine. So that's one of the reasons that I really like using the glue and the tape method. So after just a couple minutes with the sandpaper to kind of clean up the edges, I went ahead and put the pipe in, and it was absolutely perfect. Nice and snug, fits absolutely the way that I wanted it, so love that one. Now it was time to test the hole for the router, and this is actually the first time. I just put the measurement into the computer, didn't test it on my scrap wood, and this was too tight. It needed to be about 1 millimeter larger. To be sure though, I think I will make this diameter 2 millimeters larger. I also need to make this a little bit shorter. That line right there is exactly where it hits the Z-axis. So I need to give a little bit of clearance. So I need to move that in about another 1/4 of an inch. So that design will have to be altered as well. If I was making this out of PVC, I don't think it would have split out. I think that would have worked fine. This, however, did not. I attempted to put a screw in to tighten this down, and this just broke out. So this is going to change. I'm going to redesign this one more time, put this back straight, and I'm going to put a separate ring on top that I'll be able to put a hose clamp on to tighten it down. I think that will work a lot better. Now the distance from the edge of this hole to the pipe is absolutely perfect. I want to be able to maintain that because that test worked out fine. But I do have several different changes that I need to make, so it's back to the drawing board. I decided to start from scratch. Sometimes it's a lot easier to start with the beginning and use the original drawing as a guide. And that's what I did, and made the necessary changes, plus I made some additional modifications also. The first thing that I did when I made this overall dust boot smaller was that I had to change this radius so that the magnets would fit in here. Now on this top layer, these holes are for the M5. These 4 in the corner are going to be able to support the magnets underneath, and if I turn this layer on, you'll be able to see that. The red line here is where the magnets will be on that bottom layer. The M5 screw will be able to attach directly to these 4 magnets. Now the other 3 holes are just alignment pins. I'm going to use a longer M5 screw to be able to go down through the top and to the bottom layer. This circle I left exactly the same. I changed the size of this by 2 millimeters, and you can see basically the same thing. When I start and cut the top of the bottom layer, all I'm going to do is cut the holes for the magnet, and I'll cut the holes for the pins themselves. And that way I'll have perfect alignment from the top plate to this bottom plate. From there, I'll flip this over. I'll turn the bottom on, and we'll turn the other layer off. Let's do the same thing. We'll get the brush layer turned on, and we'll turn off this one. And now you can take a look and see, by changing that radius, I have a whole lot more room that was needed. I also changed the radius of this to bring it in a lot closer. And that's really the changes that I made. So if I open up these other layers now so that you can see that one at a time. Right. Now this is the bottom of the layer, and this is the top side of it where I just cut out the red, and I'm going to flip it over and I'll cut out the light blue and take care of the actual cutout, the slot for the brush, and my 2 holes. If we put the third layer on top of it, which is my top plate, you can see how these holes will be drilled and everything will align perfectly. The first thing I'm going to do on this bottom brush is be able to cut out this slot. To do that, I'll use the pocket. Will come down 3.7 millimeters. I actually think that is deep enough. We'll use the 1/8 inch end mill. Everything else will be fine, and this will be renamed to the dust boot. So a dust boot for the brush, and that's my pocket, and we'll calculate that. And we got to be able to select these 2 vectors right there, and now let's calculate it. And there we go. Those will be in there. Now, of course, at this point, the wood is going to be flipped over. So let's reset everything. The only thing we need to be able to show is this right there. That is it. And again, that's going to go down 3.7 millimeters. I think that's deep enough. If we wanted to change that, go back into this one, and let's change it where we could go down, and we'll go down 6 millimeters instead of the 3.7. That'll be just a little bit deeper. Everything else stays the same. The name will stay the same. We'll just recalculate that, reset this, preview it, and that will take care of it. It just goes a little bit deeper, and that'll give a little bit more teeth to be able to hold those brushes in there. All right, the next thing we need to do, let's go back so we can see the whole thing. We'll unselect that, and we will select, we need to cut this and this. Got to hold the shift key down, and we're going to cut on the inside. 12.6, 1/8 inch end mill, that's all selected. We're cutting on the inside of this. I will add the ramps. 25 millimeters is fine. No tabs again. And this is going to be the dust boot. And this is my bottom. Alright, we'll calculate that. And yes, it will cut through the material. And we need the outside. The outside is going to be my Toolpath, 12.6. That this time we're cutting on the outside. We will add the ramps. That will be there, and this will be the dust boot. And this is my cutout, my bottom cutout. So that's what's going to take place on the bottom. And then from there, we take these off. We'll take this one. That will be the top side of that. Now I am using the Star Bond thick, of course, with the accelerator and the blue tape to be able to put this material down on the wasteboard to hold it. Blue tape really doesn't matter. You can use any of the blue tape. I really like this Star Bond glue, and this is available in the description at a substantial discount, so you need to check that out. One of the ways that I ensure the alignment is I'll put this where it belongs and have the first piece of tape right there, and then the second piece of tape I can easily align it. By placing it right where it needs to be, right there, and start laying that down, then I can move that out of the way, push that down, and I know that this piece now and this piece will match up perfectly. I'll repeat this process for the next and the final piece the same exact way. So I'll line that up right there, and I can start putting it down, and then just like that. And now I know all three pieces are going to line up just right. You don't need a lot of the CA glue. Just a little stream of it. And that is plenty. I'll put the accelerator on this side. Now I'll flip this over and put it. That's where I want it, right there. And just pressing that down for a moment, and now it's good and solid and it's ready to go. So that is an excellent hold down method that's not going to go anywhere at all. I want to point out one thing. I just showed you gluing and taping down this project board, and it had 3 pieces of tape. The reason being is that first carving that I did was with the holes to hold the magnet and for the alignment pins. At that point, once that was done, I just flipped it over, and now I'm cutting out the bottom side of the bottom plate. And this is where the bristles will be glued in. The holes are already cut out, so I didn't need 3 layers of tape. Just did the 2, the top and bottom, and again, that glue and tape method holds extremely well. Once this slot is cut, then it'll move to the outside and use the profile cut to cut on the outside to cut out the bottom plate itself. Now this video is getting to be just a little bit long, and I want to be able to show you though, now that this bottom plate is completely finished, I want to get it off of the machine and be able to have a good look at it. Again, 2 pieces of tape was all that's necessary to be able to hold this in place. And you can see now that slot there to be able to hold the bristles is going to be absolutely perfect. I'm glad I made the change and went with the 6 millimeters deep. As far as the flip side, all of the holes are just exactly what I wanted. This is the first test of the sleeve. Now I knew this wouldn't work from the standpoint of all these little fingers sticking up because it's plywood and I knew they would break off. But this was to prove that the design would work, and once that was done, then I could actually move to the PVC. Well, the concept of the design worked, but these little tabs just are not strong enough with the plywood, nor that I really expect it to be. I wanted to be able to test out this concept, and this will work perfectly. The clamp will slide right over it and then be able to clamp onto the router. Now if I were to design this again, I would not put so many little fingers in there. That was not necessary. All that's really necessary is about 3, maybe 4, and that would be fine. But at any rate, I went ahead and moved to the PVC and cut these out. And this did obviously much better than what the plywood did. And this is just about finished now. I was really excited to see how this would turn out and how it would work. And I was very pleased with the success of this part. This is that $1.99 brush that I bought from Harbor Freight. All I need to do is just cut the bristles off and put them into the slot. Now I'm using some silicone adhesive to be able to do that. And guys, quite frankly, I would not recommend this. In fact, I would not do this again. If I had to do this again, I'd spend a little bit extra money and I would go ahead and buy a brush that was already set up so that it could be glued in as one complete unit. Because this did take about an hour to be able to do, far too long. But at any rate, since I had started, well, you can't stop, you got to finish it. So I had no choice but to move forward and glue all these little bristles in. Now the one thing that did make it just a little bit easier is to use a little straw to be able to put the bristles in, to be able to stick them down into that slot. And of course I put in the silicone adhesive into that slot first. So that way I could just stick it in. The straw held all the little bristles together. And then once it was seated down at the bottom of that slot, I could just simply lift the straw up and out, and that batch of the bristles were in place. And the last step was just take and align them, make sure they had glue all the way around, and it looked exactly the way that I wanted it to. Most important thing, you need to make sure you had that silicone on all the different bristles so that they'll stay in place once it dries. Now this next step was actually quite easy. I cut a length of the 2-inch PVC pipe, put it into the workbench vise, and heated it up with the heat gun. Now this only took just a couple minutes to be able to heat up and get pliable, and from there take the shop vac hose and start working it into that pipe. A little extra heat here and there to make sure that it stayed nice and soft, and I could continue to shove that hose right into that PVC. And that makes for an absolutely fantastic fitting that works extremely well. I was very surprised, pleased at how effective that this was, and quite frankly how little of a time that it took to be able to do this. Now that I have it seated exactly the way that I want it, give it just a few minutes to be able to cool, and now it will be able to slip in and out easily. So this, I'm very happy with the results. Now it's all finished. It's time to put this onto the CNC machine and test it out. So the first thing, this top part slips on perfectly, and the hose clamp was able to tighten this down. So this bracket worked absolutely fantastic. Next goes in the PVC pipe and then snap on the bottom. So it takes just a matter of seconds to be able to get it all hooked up, and this is the finished setup. Now the chain's temporary, but I think this will hold the hose very nicely for this test. The bit that I'm using for this test is the 1/4 inch end mill. I knew that would generate quite a bit of sawdust, and I wanted to just see just how effective this dust boot was. And you can see it is capturing virtually every bit of the sawdust. So this was a very successful project that cost little to nothing, and I enjoyed making it and sharing this project with you. And the best part about this, I have one more tool that now has dust collection on it, and it will continue to help reduce the dust that's generated by doing these different projects in the shop. So I am thrilled to death with the success of this dust boot. Thank you for watching today. I really appreciate you spending some time and seeing this project being made. Oh, by the way, if you're still with me after watching this entire video and you'd like to see more details on how I created the design for this dust boot, leave me a comment down in the comment section below, and I'll do another video and go into detail on exactly how to set up the toolpaths and design this. But I thought it was just getting a little bit too long, and I wanted to be able to show how this very simple dust boot went together. So again, I appreciate you watching, and if you're still with me, I appreciate you sticking with me all the way to the end. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye now.